Okay, so the positioning of Alan Moore's Watchmen in the DC universe is kinda odd. They are technically a part of it, but they reside in their own little pocket with their own continuity and timeline, not really overlapping or crossing over with the main DC characters and continuity. Except when they did try to incorporate them into the mainline DC universe and backfired. But that's a story for another time. To build up this timeline, I'm gonna be incorporating only content written or commissioned by Alan Moore himself, which means nothing from the extended universe, which includes the Before Watchmen prequel comics, the HBO series, which essentially functions as a sequel, Tom King's Rorschach sequel comic, and definitely, most certainly no Doomsday Clock. The only other bit of content I will work into this timeline is the Watchmen Companion RPG tabletop game, which includes extra information about characters' backstories and events, and most importantly, Alan Moore had direct involvement with it, providing information and help for the module. Most of the events in the Watchmen timeline are pretty much the same to our own up until the early 20th century with the rise of masked vigilantes in America. This is a multi-generational story that spans decades, just so you know. With that said, let's go down this crazy road. This alternate history really branches off in 1938. A man in a mask, later known as Hooded Justice, beats the shit out of 3 members of a gang that had assaulted a couple, permanently paralyzing one of the criminals. Shortly after that, he stops a store robbery, spawning a nationwide interest in vigilantes and superheroes. This one event is the catalyst that sparks nearly everything that transpires throughout the story, inspiring an entire group of lonely, damaged, deranged, kooky, and kinky people to dress up and play cops and robbers. This is implied to be directly connected with the release of Action Comics #1, featuring the first ever appearance of Superman in comics released that year, influencing this attraction to superheroes. By the way, we never really get to know Hooded Justice's real identity, but is heavily implied throughout the comic that he might be Rolf Mueller, a KKK member circus strongman with a German accent. Hooded Justice was noted to speak in support of the Third Reich. Yikes. 1939. Night Owl Hollis Mason, an NYC police officer with a very conservative upbringing, becomes active after hearing the Hooded Justice news. Follow the next few months by several individuals donning colorful costumes as vigilantes across the East Coast. Mothman Byron Lewis, the son of a rich family, he was the third one to join in on the fun as a masked adventurer after Hooded Justice and Night Owl, wearing a large pair of wings and a black mask. Just a rich boy trying to find a hobby, really. The comedian Edward Blake, a 16-year-old juvie who has been seen foiling an attempted robbery of a jewelry as an excuse to beat people up. Silk Spectre, Sally Juspechik / Jupiter, who started dressing up as a way to reap the commercial benefits of being a masked adventurer. The Silhouette, Ursula Sand, was an Austrian immigrant who moved into the US the previous year, started dressing up as a sign of individuality and a pent-up revenge fantasy. Dollar Bill, Bill Brady, a star college athlete from Kansas who was initially employed as a mascot, an in-house superhero for the National Bank of New York, capitalizing on the rise of Hero's popularity. And Captain Metropolis, Nelson Gardner, a Marine veteran who was honorably discharged in 1937, made his debut in Hoboken, stopping a gas station holdup and most likely joined to beat up minorities. Pretty sure he did that. There's a clear pattern in these masked heroes, and it's that nobody is in it for the right reasons, and it's argued that there really isn't a right reason to join in. Influenced by the Hooded Justice splash, eventually they all come together by suggestion of Lawrence Schexnayder, Silk Spectre's manager, and Captain Metropolis to put up an ad calling other masked adventurers, eventually forming a group called the Minutemen, although many of the group were really more interested in the commercial value of being part of a team of masked vigilantes to push their own agendas and careers. Moloch Edward William Jacoby makes his debut as a supervillain in the underworld using hypnotism. He builds a solar mirror which he threatens to destroy the Empire State with. This was stopped by the group and the solar mirror kept as a trophy. King Mob, a criminal with an ape mask, is apprehended by the group and the ape mask is also kept as a trophy and placed in the trophy room. Germany invades Poland that same year. World War II starts. After this newfound fad, the population started to lose interest in superhero comics because there were actual superheroes running around and pivoted towards pirate comics. A new form of adventure permeated the comic strips. 1940. After a group meeting where they all take the famous Minutemen picture, Edward Blake, the comedian, essays Sally Jupiter's Silk Spectre only to be stopped by Hooded Justice. Hans von Krupp, Captain Axis, flees to America from Germany after failing the Third Reich. Even though he was wanted dead by the Fuhrer, he was still deadly fanatical to his cause. He acted as a saboteur in America, threatening factories, USO shows, and propagandistic war films. The group's manager, Larry Schexnayder, discovers that Hooded Justice and Captain Metropolis are in a homosexual relationship. He decides that the public should not find out about it. He suggests that Sally should be seen with Hooded Justice to make the press think they have a romance as a cover-up. 1941. Japan bombs the American naval base at Pearl Harbor and the US joins World War II. This slowed down the Minutemen activity through the war years. Nelson Gardner, Captain Metropolis, was reactivated by the military. Bill Brady, Dollar Bill, was drafted. Byron Lewis, Mothman, was a conscientious objector and was assigned as a medical aid. And the comedian became a special government operative. Hollis Mason, Night Owl, couldn't really be drafted due to his status as a policeman, and Hooded Justice didn't really have an identity to be drafted. 1942. The Manhattan Project begins designing the nuclear bombs. The remaining Minutemen in the US, Night Owl, Hooded Justice, the Silhouette, and Silk Spectre, periodically battle two supervillains, Captain Axis and the Screaming Skull, Walter Sileski. The latter was just in it for shits and giggles, really. He literally flipped a coin to decide whether he'd be a good guy or a bad guy. 1945. The bombs are dropped on Japan. The war ends. The comedian shoots and kills 7 Japanese POWs out of a bet he made to one other officer. He gets court-martialed for this, and nothing happens to him. The Bank of New York issues that Dollar Bill is returning home from the war. Gangsters beware. During a battle between the Minutemen and Captain Axis on an Allied submarine in the Arctic Circle, Hooded Justice yeets Captain Axis into the ocean. He didn't resurface. 1946. Dollar Bill's cape gets caught on a rotating bank door during a robbery and gets shot point blank by a bank robber, dying instantly. I think this is where Edna Mode gets the no capes rule. No capes! The Silhouette, Ursula Zant, is outed as a lesbian and unjustly expelled from the group. Later, she was found dead with her lover, both killed by the Liquidator, an old enemy. This entire situation is so ironic considering that Nelson Gardner and Hooded Justice had a homosexual relationship and they basically backstabbed Ursula to preserve the public image of the group. 1947. Lawrence Schexnayder, the group's manager, and Sally Jupiter get married, retiring from the Minutemen. The Doomsday Clock, a symbolic device tracking how close humanity is to nuclear annihilation, is invented. How cool. 1948. John Osterman, future Dr. Manhattan, arrives at Princeton. Byron Lewis punches Nelson Gardner in the face for insulting a black cab driver in front of the Minutemen headquarters. The police are called to break up the fight. 1949. Due to members leaving, villains in prison, or simply moving on out of the spotlight, the Minutemen disband. 1950. Sally has an affair with Edward Blake. Later that year, Laurie Juspecic is born. This one event would be a huge revelation in the story. 1951. Walter Kovacs, age 10, future Rorschach, gets into a fight with two other kids, partially blinding one of them. He is later placed at the Charlton home, New Jersey. The next couple of years are pretty uneventful up until 1954. The House of Un-American Activities Committee calls all mass vigilantes before Senator Joseph McCarthy to reveal their identities. Due to his involvement with the government, the comedian Edward Blake was not compelled to do so. Byron Lewis' Mothman was thoroughly investigated due to his left-wing affiliations. He was labeled as a communist sympathizer. Night Owl and Captain Metropolis were simply not investigated as thoroughly due to their positions as policemen and military. Laurie Juspecic hears her parents arguing. She picks up a snow globe and drops it when she's startled by her quote-unquote dad. 1955. Hooded Justice is called to reveal his identity, which he refuses, and disappears from the public eye, never to be seen again. Some people theorize that the comedian murdered him out of revenge for stopping him from essaying Sally Jupiter, and he used his connections within the government to prevent any investigations. A body washes up off the coast of Boston with a bullet to the head, identified as Rolf Mueller. 1956. Walter Kovacs, future Rorschach, starts working on a garment firm. Sally Jupiter divorces Lawrence Schexnayder. Adrian Veidt, future Ozymandias, begins his journey following Alexander the Great's steps. 1958. Adrian Veidt becomes part of the new wave of mass adventurers under the name Ozymandias, a reference to the Egyptian pharaoh Ramses II, making his debut by exposing an opium and heroin smuggling racket. 1959. John Osterman receives his PhD in atomic physics and arrives at the Gila Flats Weapons Testing Center, where shortly after he meets Janie Slater, whom he will have his first relationship with. He gets trapped inside an intrinsic field chamber and destroyed down to his atoms. He reappears as Dr. Manhattan on November 22 that year. This constitutes another cornerstone event within this universe. With the introduction of Dr. Manhattan, the entire world changes in a political and social sense. 1960. The government reveals the existence of Dr. Manhattan, whom is kept alongside with Edward Blake as a government operative. Because of the existence of Dr. Manhattan, science starts to develop at a much quicker pace from this point forward. At a fundraiser for famine in India, Captain Metropolis, the comedian, Night Owl, and Mothman reunite alongside the newcomer adventurers Dr. Manhattan and Ozymandias, whom is the only one Manhattan finds interesting. After interacting with Dr. Manhattan, Hollis Mason, Night Owl, contemplates retirement. 1961. Ford and General Electric are actively pursuing electric cars thanks to Dr. Manhattan's ability to synthesize large amounts of lithium for batteries. John F. Kennedy is elected president. 1962. Hollis Mason officially retires and publishes his autobiography Under the Hood, in which he recounts his years as a crime fighter. After that, Daniel Dreiberg, future Night Owl 2, contacts him and asks if he could use the name, which he allows. Byron Lewis, Mothman, is admitted to an asylum in Maine after a mental breakdown. Katie Genovese orders a dress made out of a Manhattan spin-off fabric. After she decides not to pick it up, thinking it was too ugly, Walter Kovacs takes it home and keeps it, thinking it's pretty. Black and white, as things should be in his eyes. At a civic banquet in honor of Hollis Mason, he receives a statue of himself as Night Owl with the words "Ingratitude" engraved. 1963. President Kennedy is assassinated, presumably by the comedian, on government orders. Dr. Manhattan reveals to Janie Slater he can see the future, which breaks her reality. 1964. Kitty Genovese is murdered outside an apartment complex. Walter Kovacs decides to make a mask out of the dress Kitty Genovese didn't pick up years prior, and hits the streets as Rorschach after hearing the news.
Rorschach's Journal, March 18th, 1964. First entry. The face is finished at last. Wonderful black and white, as all things should be. I am glad I decided to keep the dress these past 2 years. The face is perfect, a thing of true beauty. A face that can shelter me from the world and hide my weary senses. A face which I can finally stare down in the mirror. From this point on, I've decided to write down everything I see and experience which might possibly have a bearing upon my nocturnal mission. This journal will be a complete record of my deeds, which I can refer back to, and a voucher to show the angels when they come looking for me on Judgment Day. I'll start tonight with the woman and her killers.
1965. Rorschach and Night Owl 2 team up to bring down the underboss and Big Figure, gangsters that ran criminal operations. 1966. Laurie Juspechik makes her debut as Silk Spectre 2. Captain Metropolis tries to put together a new group of masked adventurers with the new generation of heroes: Rorschach, Walter Kovacs, Night Owl 2, Daniel Dryberg, Ozymandias, Adrian Veidt, Silk Spectre 2, Laurie Juspechik, and some of the old generation heroes from the Minutemen, himself, Nelson Gardner, and the comedian Edward Blake. A team he pathetically calls the Crime Busters, which only lasts for one meeting before they disband. The comedian absolutely killed the chances of the group developing with a very cynical but realistic speech about them not really making a difference in the world. Although later they, except Dr. Manhattan, would go on to battle Moloch, but not as a concrete team. Dr. Manhattan and Silk Spectre go on patrol and kiss for the first time. She is 16 at this point, mind you, and he is 30.
That's the sound of the police!
Janie Slater leaves him naturally. 1967. This is the year Ozymandias, Adrian Veidt, begins his plan to save the world and make the nations unite. He submits a patent for public charging stations which he calls spark hydrants. A cult develops in New York City. It is known as the Brethren and is an entity dedicated to murdering its victims and draining their blood. How nice. The leader of said entity is known as Mother. She is eventually defeated by the group. Dimensional Developments, a company owned by Adrian Veidt, begins to hire people that were related or in close proximity to Dr. Manhattan over the years. This is to methodically give them cancer and pin it on Manhattan in the future. 1968. There is a major blackout in New York City due to one of Moloch's schemes. Night Owl 2 has an encounter with the Twilight Lady, a low-level villain whose real name is Leslie Shatwick, and arrests her. Adrian Veidt keeps developing his plan, now acquiring Alguna Island off the Mosquito Coast, and sets up the cover firm Pyramid Deliveries. It's funny because Alguna Island literally translates to some island in Spanish. Richard Nixon is elected President of the United States. 1969. Dr. Manhattan's dad dies, which clears him to reveal his real identity to the world without fear. 1970. After serving 2 years in prison, the Twilight Lady, Leslie Shatwick, moves to France, never to be heard of or seen again. The Gila Flats facility is closed down. Dr. Manhattan and Laurie move in together. 1971. On Richard Nixon's request, Dr. Manhattan intervenes in the Vietnam conflict, which he ends in 2 months by molecularly transforming the jungles in which they hid into noxious gases, with the Viet Cong requesting to surrender to him personally as if he was some sort of deity. At some point during this time, Edward Blake impregnates a Vietnamese woman. At Vivienne Day, June 20th, Victory at Vietnam Day, a pregnant Vietnamese woman is murdered by the comedian when she slashes him across the face for refusing to take responsibility for her unborn child. Manhattan watches without doing anything and gets called out by the comedian. He gets a permanent scar out of this event. Eddie Blake gets court-martialed for shooting the Vietnamese woman, but it gets swept under the rug since he states it was in self-defense. His identity is still unrevealed. Wally Weaver, one of John Osterman's friends back in Gila Flats and subsequent employee to Dimensional Developments, dies of cancer. 1972. Richard Nixon is re-elected for a second term. 1973. Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein are murdered before they can expose the Watergate scandal involving Nixon. All the evidence was destroyed. It is implied that the comedian had a hand in their deaths. A banquet is held in honor of Edward Blake, where Laurie Juspechik accuses him of trying to assassinate her mom, and she throws a drink in his face. 1974. Nelson Gardner, Captain Metropolis, crashes his car and gets decapitated in the accident. 1975. The Nixon administration passes a constitutional amendment allowing him to run for president for a third term. A man named Gerald Anthony Grice kidnaps a 6-year-old girl by the name of Blair Roach, believing her to be connected to the Roach chemical fortune. When he realized the mistake, he murders her and feeds her to his dogs. Rorschach discovers this and burns him alive. After this one event, Rorschach begins to act much more ruthless and unhinged towards criminals. Adrian Veidt retires as a mass adventurer, revealing his identity publicly and creating Veidt Enterprises. 1976. Captain Carnage harasses costume heroes down the street to be beat up by them. Eventually, he pulled this stunt on Rorschach, who, being more unhinged after the incident with Blair Roach, threw him down an elevator shaft and killed him. Richard Nixon is re-elected for a third term as President of the United States. 1977. Graffiti with the quote, "Who watches the Watchmen?" start popping up around New York City, signaling the public's distrust of mass vigilantes and the government. The police go on strike because of this, provoking riots in New York City and Washington, D.C. At the NYC riots, Night Owl and the comedian try to contain the chaos. Rorschach, now working alone, is on the Lower East Side of the city. In Washington, Dr. Manhattan and Silk Spectre manage the riots, ending in Manhattan teleporting all of them away. The Keene Act, a bill proposed by Senator Keene, is passed, making mass vigilantes not sanctioned by the government, aka the comedian and Dr. Manhattan, illegal. This makes Dan Dreiberg, Night Owl 2, and Laurie Juspechik, Silk Spectre 2, retire. Rorschach, on the other hand, murders a multiple rapist and leaves his body outside of the police department with a note simply reading, "Never," indicating he would keep operating as a mass vigilante outside the law. 1978. The comedian rescues American hostages in Iran, killing 17 Iranian citizens in the process. 1980. Sally Jupiter settles herself at the Nepenthe Gardens Rest Resort in California. Richard Nixon is re-elected for a fourth term as President of the United States. 1981. Dr. Manhattan moves to the Rockefeller Military Research Center. 1983. Max Shea, a pirate comics writer, disappears from his home in Boston. Here, he is kidnapped by Ozymandias people to force him to participate on his plan, creating a genetically modified psychic squid. That same week, the brain of the deceased psychic Robert Deshane is stolen from the mortuary to be cloned and used for this monster. Yeah, apparently real psychic people are a thing in the Watchmen universe. After this happens, a whole group of artists and scientists are kidnapped to be forced to work on the creation of this creature in the island Vought. 1984. Richard Nixon is re-elected for a 5th term. 1985. Now we've arrived to the year the main story takes place and most of it goes down. While on a mission from the government, the comedian comes across Vought's island where he sees what he is planning, which breaks his psyche. Later, he drunkenly visits Edgar Jacobi, Moloch, to confess what he's learned about Ozymandias' plan. Ozymandias had bugged Jacobi's house and realized that Blake knows about his plan. Then Ozymandias breaks into Blake's apartment, throwing him out through the window, killing him. This event kickstarts the main story, and I think I'll leave it up to this point. This is the original Watchmen timeline. Anyways guys, that is my Watchmen timeline video. I hope you enjoyed it. This took me a while to put together. I was researching the Watchmen companion book and comparing it to the Watchmen wiki and picking out the most meaningful events in the timeline and corroborating that with the book. And it was a massive video, and I think it's pretty good. I think it came out all right. So guys, remember to like and subscribe for more content like this. I'll be making individual Minutemen videos going into their backstories and each character individually. So yeah, look out for that. And yeah, I think that's it for today guys. Thank you for watching.